Well, I told you I'd call out dumb things when I saw them. Here's something that's pretty dumb. Let's talk about it. So welcome to Dave Lenthicum is Not AI. I'm Dave, an AI SME and an AI skeptic, looking at AI with a balanced perspective. Let's get started. This was brought to my attention by you guys. Sent me a note and let me know that this was out there. And I decided to give it a look. And evidently, Bob Sternfels, he's a global managing partner, effectively the CEO of McKinsey and Company, and he's held the role since 2021 and was reelected for a second term beginning in July 2024, based in San Francisco. Good for him. I don't know who he is. I never met him. I don't work at McKinsey, and therefore I have no opinion on whether or not he's a good CEO and not a good leader. Typically when you find that people get to the higher levels in some of these big consulting firms, and I've worked at a few of them, they're typically going to be the best of the best. At least you hope so. But he's been saying some things that I think need to be brought into question. And I've gotten some of my clients are coming to me about it, and my students are coming to me about it. And he's just confusing lots of stuff out there with this. And maybe he didn't mean to do this, but it's done. And so let's talk about it.
So then you kind of say, okay, what does that mean for McKinsey? We're applying this to ourselves. And, I often get asked, how big is McKinsey? My latest answer to you would be 60,000, but it's 40,000 humans and 20,000 agents. A little over a year and a half ago, that was 3,000 agents. And I originally thought it was going to take us to 2030 to get to one agent per human. I think we're going to be there in 18 months. And we're going to have a workforce that is human and agentic.
All right. Lots of stuff to break down there. Lots of baggage. Number one, him equating humans to agents, to AI agents, is wildly offensive. At least if I was working at McKinsey, I would say, hey, great, thank you. Because they're vastly different in the capabilities. Like we always talk about on this channel, and I talk about this, and I've talked about this for the last 20 years, and I've been working with AI since the 80s, is that AI is good at automating tasks. It's not good at replacing people. And he may be alluding to that, but that's not the way it came across. And so it's not a good internal relationship take to equate, people with automation. Therefore, kind of a veiled threat. I don't know if their employees took it this way, that, you can be replaced by some of these AI agents that we're building, things like that, but it kind of sounded like that. The big thing that bugs me about this kind of stuff is typically they don't know what an AI agent is. They don't know what an AI agent does. And I don't know what they're doing with their internal systems, but I doubt they're replacing humans with agents on a one-on-one basis. And I doubt that agents are going to be able to put out the productivity of humans, at least anytime soon. How do I know that? Well, I built them for a long time. I have the best-selling agentic AI architecture course, and teach it and all that kind of stuff. Wrote books about it, and know a little bit about how you build and deploy these things. They're helpful, definitely, and they're useful. But as far as replacing human beings, that's a bit of a stretch, at least at this point. He probably has some automations that people are setting up, some RPA stuff, things like that. I don't know what's going on at McKinsey. If you guys know, let me know down in the comments if you work at McKinsey, if someone's going to write up what they're doing. But I guarantee you they're not at the level of change that Bob is bragging about, but I don't know. Don't work at McKinsey. So, kind of take that with a grain of salt. The larger thing here is that big consulting companies should be teaching people, and they should be guiding them as to how to use this technology effectively. This doesn't help, because at the end of the day, this is confusion. This is basically, bragging about something that probably doesn't exist within the company. If it does, bring us in and to take a look at it. And everybody gets confused about what's actually happening in the industry, and the realities and the marketing hype around the technology. So as we talked about here a lot, the agentic AI marketplace, the cloud providers, big tech providers, things like that, have gotten way over their skis, and big consulting firms as well, in terms of defining and hyping agentic AI as a second coming of something that's going to fix everything. And we've had lots of fixes that, lots of hypey, fix stuff that happened over the last, 20, 30 years, cloud computing, service-oriented architecture, distributed computing, all that kind of stuff, client server, rise of the web. We kind of lived through it. And this is really going to be none different. And so at the end of the day, agentic AI is going to have some value, but it's only going to be useful in particular a narrow margin of problem domains out there, as I found in building this stuff. It's very expensive. It takes some knowledge and skill sets to get it in place. And if you don't understand that and you're not able to put it in the right perspective, which evidently we're not doing that here, you're going to end up making mistakes. You're going to end up spending money that you don't need to spend. You're going to make mistakes with 3, 4 zeros on the end of it. And I see many companies heading in that direction because out in the zeitgeist, everybody's using agentic AI. Everybody's automating stuff with agents. Look what McKinsey's doing, things like that. Look what the other folks are doing, things like that. None of that stuff is happening at the level that I think people are talking about. At least I haven't seen it that way. And I'm tuned into a lot of AI usage models with the Global 2000 companies out there. Certainly my clients and studies and working with analysts, things like that. And this kind of stuff's not going to be helpful. And I think that's, something that just kind of needs to be said. And I think you guys instinctually know that, and you realize this is hyperbole. But many people take this hyperbole as truth. And they start moving in this direction, and they're going to find that they're going to be disappointed because there is no there. And so I respect Bob McKinsey, things like that. And by the way, he's not the only one doing this. Lots of companies out there doing this. This is probably the more egregious one I saw recently. And also, I think it's not necessarily going to be a good message for internally to get to the employees. By the way, we're replacing you with AI agents. Good luck doing that. Every company that's made the edict that they're going to replace people with AI, they end up hiring their folks back. They end up making huge mistakes. The customers get mad at them. The employees get mad at them. We're just not there yet. And I think these kinds of outlandish claims that many people are making, people that are not just lower in the organization, that are just product managers, things like that. We're talking about CEOs and boards of directors and presidents that are making these claims. You're going to end up looking silly, and I'm not sure why you want to do that. But that's the way this stuff is going to end up when you've already saw a lot of CEOs look silly. We've covered it here on this channel. So anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. So what's actually occurring out there? It's very different than this, what we're here talking about, where there's, CEOs are bragging about, use of agentic-based systems. And by the way, what probably happened here, and I don't know for sure, but he has a marketing person or a group of marketing people, and they're whispering in his ear, we want you to say this because this is going to make us look really innovative if we're, talking about how these agents are employees. And whatever reason he ran with it. If I was CEO of the company, I've been a CEO a few times, and I've had marketing people whisper in my ears about things that they wanted me to say that were very much hyperbole. In many instances, it's up to me whether I said them or not. And the majority of the times I didn't, because it just made us look silly. And it's stretching the truth. And that's what this is here. I don't know if he's aware of that or not. But those that are in the know about how agentic-based systems work and how AI agents are deployed and the value that they have, understand that this is hyperbole. We're just not there yet. And also, I think it's a little insulting. So that's probably what's going on here. And, all the, people who are in the higher areas in these big consulting firms, they've had media training. So what's going on right now is a land grab. So in other words, I see generative AI popped up in 2022. I think a lot of the consulting companies missed it, didn't get into the market, didn't figure out how to leverage it. Most of them had AI groups. Obviously, they didn't move as aggressively as they thought they should after the generative AI space. And then suddenly, when agentic popped up a couple of years ago, they see it as their opportunity to, in essence, redeem themselves. And so they're all in on the agentic stuff and just spending massive amounts of money, making massive amount of claims, and they're out there trying to out-hype their competitors and the technology providers and the consulting providers, things like that. And that's going to be fine. But you have to understand there's got to be reality at the end here. So, very much like cloud computing, 2009, 2010, people got over their skis on the technology, just making claims like, well, we're all going to be in the cloud in 2 years. I think Gartner actually said that, and I covered it at my other channel. And they weren't, because obviously it was going to be a slow trog, to get into the cloud space and get the enterprise systems and get the applications and the data rehosted on the cloud. And here we are in 2026, and we're nowhere near the claims that were being made in 2010 that they said were going to be a few years to 80%, 90% of systems in the cloud. The transition to generative and generative with agentic-based deployments is going to follow the same sort of pattern. We just don't have the skills. We just don't have the money. And also in many cases, we don't have the use cases. So I'm seeing people, when they're calling me in to look at their use case for, generative or agentic AI, in many cases it's not needed. They're over-engineering, they're overbuilding something. Certainly with agentic, because you got to remember, it's going to be 10 times the cost to operate those things. You're dealing with a multi-agent system, dealing with distributed operations, you're dealing with, huge cloud bills, you're dealing with, inference at scale and distributed inference. All those kinds of things are not free, versus building a traditional monolithic system, which in many cases is going to be good enough for who it's for and solve the particular problem and solve it at 1/10 of the cost. So if you're willing to spend 10 times the money, then you can certainly use agentic AI and you can push it into any problem domain. If you have enough money and time, you can make it work. That's an easy thing to say, but there has to be business value that comes back from the business. You got to remember, the businesses out there don't have a huge pile of money, just start throwing at AI. So they can get into it baby steps, incrementally, finding the right use cases, building, small tactical solutions, which I think is the way most of AI is going to be consumed within these Global 2000 companies. And that's just going to be the way it is. So we're not going to have this big inflection point that, the tech providers and the consulting firms are waiting for right now. Because it just can't happen. It's going to violate the laws of nature, so to speak, in how enterprises consume technology. I know people hate to see that, but the primary question I get from organizations out there that are either selling this technology or trying to sell consulting services is they expected this to be much higher and much more inflected than it is right now. And I think it's probably true. And told you a couple of years ago, we talked about this a lot. I hate being the designated buzzkill, but I'm also a realist. And I think you should really kind of align your expectations around how enterprises actually consume this technology and the growth of that. And agentic is going to be no different. Generative AI, useful. Machine learning, useful. All of these things will find their places in different systems, but it's not going to replace everything. And we're not going to replace people within these organizations with AI agents. If anything, the AI agents are going to help them automate tasks like, I do a lot, things like that. And it's going to make life better. And in many cases, if there's enough automation and enough productivity, enough efficiency, we can displace humans and we can actually put them in other roles. You got to remember, humans are creative, innovative creatures, really, that AI agents are going to be pretty hard pressed to backfill. So I'm on team human. So here I am. I've been in the AI space for a long period of time. And in many cases, it's going to be a disruption. That's going to be fine. We'll adjust to it. And I think life after will be even better. This running around in circles, talking about agents, we're going to replace our employees. And, this is going to be, we're going to start pushing people out in the streets, and some of the layoffs we see where they're using AI as an excuse really has to stop, guys. You're looking silly. And I don't think that your employees will appreciate it. I don't think your clients appreciate it. So get a little smarter with this stuff, get a bit of an education. Hey, take my agentic AI architecture course and understand what the technology is and also what the technology isn't. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe and check out my other videos on this channel. Also check out my InfoWorld Cloud Computing blog, my 100+ LinkedIn learning courses, and of course, my generative AI architecture course out on Go Cloud Careers. And finally, my latest books, Unlocking the Power of Cloud and An Insider's Guide to Cloud Computing. So until next week, stay very, very safe. The magical YouTube algorithm thinks this is another one of my videos that you should watch next. Take care, guys.